In the grand corridors of Kensington Palace, where centuries of royal history whisper through ancient walls, something unprecedented was about to unfold. The Prince and Princess of Wales, known to the world as William and Kate, were facing a moment that would test the very foundation of their marriage, their duty, and their hearts. What started as a routine royal obligation would become the most emotionally charged farewell ever witnessed within palace walls, leaving even the most seasoned royal staff struggling to maintain their composure. This isn't just another royal story about protocol and duty. This is about two people who fell in love as university students, built a fairy tale romance, and now found themselves at a crossroads where love, sacrifice, and royal responsibility collided in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. The goodbye that was about to happen would echo through every corner of the palace, touching the hearts of everyone who witnessed it, and proving that even royals are, at their core, simply human beings facing impossible choices. What you're about to discover is the untold story of a moment so raw, so genuine, and so emotionally powerful that it reminded the entire world why William and Kate's love story has captured hearts across the globe. This is the story of a goodbye that nobody saw coming, but everyone will remember forever. The morning of March 15th began like any other at Kensington Palace. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before the ornate mirror in her dressing room, carefully applying the subtle makeup that had become her signature look. Her reflection showed a woman who had gracefully evolved from the shy university student who once captured Prince William's heart into one of the most beloved royals of modern times. Yet today, something was different. Her usual serene composure was tinged with an almost imperceptible tension, a shadow of worry that she couldn't quite shake. William emerged from his study, where he had been on a conference call with officials from the Foreign Office. His face carried the weight of responsibility that had become increasingly familiar over the past year. At 41, the future king had grown into his role with remarkable grace, but the burden of duty seemed heavier with each passing day. He paused when he saw Catherine, struck as always by her quiet strength and beauty, but also noticing the same underlying concern that had been growing between them for weeks. The couple had learned 3 days earlier about an urgent diplomatic mission that would require William's immediate attention. The situation in a Commonwealth nation had deteriorated rapidly, and the Foreign Office, in consultation with his father King Charles III, had determined that William's presence was not just beneficial but absolutely necessary. The mission would require him to travel to a region experiencing significant political unrest, and while the royal protection officers had assured everyone of adequate security measures, the inherent risks were undeniable. Catherine had initially tried to convince herself that this was just another royal duty, no different from the countless engagements they had both undertaken over the years. But, as the details of the mission became clearer, she realized this was unlike anything William had faced before. The region he would be visiting had been experiencing civil unrest, and recent intelligence reports suggested that the situation was more volatile than initially believed. The fact that the mission was being kept completely confidential from the media only emphasized its sensitive and potentially dangerous nature. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had been carefully shielded from the gravity of the situation. At 10, George was old enough to understand that his father traveled frequently for work, but young enough that the specifics of royal duty remained largely abstract to him. Charlotte, at 8, possessed an intuitive understanding that something important was happening, while 5-year-old Louis remained blissfully unaware of anything beyond his normal routine of school and play. The family had spent the previous evening together in their private quarters, sharing dinner and watching Louis attempt to teach his parents his latest playground game. William had been unusually attentive, engaging with each child in ways that seemed designed to create lasting memories. Catherine noticed how he lingered during their bedtime stories, how he listened extra carefully to George's questions about his upcoming school project, how he patiently helped Charlotte with a puzzle that had been frustrating her for days. As the morning progressed, the palace staff went about their duties with professional efficiency, but those closest to the family sensed the underlying tension. Mrs. Webb, Catherine's longtime dresser, had worked with the royal family long enough to recognize the signs of a significant departure. The way Catherine carefully selected and packed certain personal items, the extended phone calls with her mother Carol Middleton, the unusual attention to details that would normally be handled by staff, all pointed to something more significant than a routine royal visit. The security briefings had been particularly sobering. William's protection team, led by Inspector Davies, had outlined protocols that went far beyond their usual procedures. The level of coordination with international security forces, the backup plans, and the communication procedures all indicated a mission where normal diplomatic immunity and royal protection might not be sufficient guarantees of safety. Catherine had not been allowed to attend these briefings, but William's demeanor afterward told her everything she needed to know about the seriousness of the situation. In their private moments together, William and Catherine had struggled with conversations that neither wanted to have. They had discussed practical matters, how long the mission might last, how they would communicate, what Catherine would tell the children if questions arose. But beneath these logistical discussions lay deeper, more frightening questions that they couldn't bring themselves to voice directly. What if something went wrong? What if the political situation deteriorated further? What if William found himself in genuine danger with no quick way home? The irony of their situation was not lost on either of them. They had built their relationship on a foundation of shared understanding about the demands of royal duty. Catherine had known from the beginning that marrying William meant accepting a life where public service would sometimes require personal sacrifice. She had embraced this reality, finding her own path within the royal framework and becoming an advocate for causes close to her heart. But knowing something intellectually and living it emotionally were entirely different experiences. William, for his part, wrestled with guilt about leaving Catherine to manage their family responsibilities alone while he undertook what could potentially be a dangerous mission. He admired her strength and capability, knowing she was more than equipped to handle whatever challenges might arise in his absence. Yet the weight of potentially leaving his wife and children, even temporarily, in order to fulfill his royal obligations created an internal conflict that threatened to overwhelm his usually steady composure. The palace's senior staff had worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail of the mission was properly arranged. Private Secretary Simon Case had coordinated with multiple government departments, while the master of the household had managed the complex logistics of rearranging William's domestic schedule to accommodate the unexpected departure. The media strategy team had prepared carefully crafted statements to explain William's absence without revealing the true nature of his mission, a delicate balance between transparency and necessary secrecy. Throughout the morning, Catherine found herself gravitating toward familiar routines that provided comfort and normalcy. She reviewed her own upcoming engagements with her personal secretary, confirming arrangements for a visit to a children's hospital and a meeting with her early childhood development team. These activities, which would continue in William's absence, represented the stability and continuity that she would need to maintain for both herself and her children. The couple's relationship had always been characterized by deep mutual respect and understanding, qualities that had only strengthened during their years of marriage and parenthood. They had learned to communicate without words, to provide support through presence rather than speeches, and to find strength in their shared commitment to both their family and their roles as future monarchs. But this morning tested those bonds in ways they had never experienced before. As noon approached, the time for William's departure grew closer, and both he and Catherine began the emotional preparation for their goodbye. They had agreed to keep the farewell private, away from the children and staff, in the small garden room that had become their personal sanctuary within the vast palace complex. This room, with its comfortable furnishings and family photographs, represented their private life together, separate from the formal grandeur that surrounded their public roles. The weight of unspoken words hung between them as they moved through their morning routines, each acutely aware that in just a few hours, they would face a goodbye unlike any they had experienced before. The palace around them continued its ancient rhythms, but, within their private world, time seemed suspended between the security of the present and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The lunch hour arrived with an unusual quietness settling over Kensington Palace. The children had been taken to their afternoon activities by their nanny, Maria, who had been discreetly informed that the prince and princess needed some private time together. The staff, sensing the gravity of the situation, moved through their duties with extra care to maintain the peaceful atmosphere that seemed so essential to the day's unfolding events. Catherine found herself in the blue drawing room, a space that had witnessed countless royal conversations throughout history. She sat in the window seat where she often retreated for quiet moments, watching the garden where her children played and where she and William had shared so many peaceful evenings together. Today, the familiar view seemed to carry additional weight. as if she was trying to memorize every detail to hold on to during the uncertain weeks ahead. William had spent the early afternoon in final preparations, reviewing briefing documents and confirming security protocols with his protection team. The mission details remained classified even within the palace, but the seriousness was evident in every conversation, every careful preparation, every contingency plan that had been meticulously developed. His private secretary had prepared a comprehensive schedule that would allow Catherine to manage any public inquiries about his absence without compromising the mission's secrecy. The couple had developed their own language of support over their years together, subtle gestures and quiet words that conveyed understanding and encouragement without the need for elaborate discussions. Today, these small communications carried extra significance. A touch on the shoulder as they passed in the hallway, a shared glance during lunch, the way Catherine arranged William's favorite flowers in his study, all served as gentle reminders of the love and partnership that anchored their marriage. Inspector Davies approached William in his study at 2:30, carrying the discreet black briefcase that contained the final mission documents. The security chief's expression was professional but sympathetic, understanding that this farewell represented far more than a routine royal departure. The timeline had been carefully calculated to allow for William's private goodbye with Catherine while still meeting the strict departure schedule required by international security coordination. Catherine had made her own quiet preparations throughout the day. She had written a letter for William to carry with him, sealed in an envelope that she planned to slip into his travel bag at the last moment. The contents of that letter contained words too personal and too emotional to be spoken aloud, expressions of love and worry and hope that could only be shared in the privacy of written communication between husband and wife. The palace staff who had worked closely with the family over the years recognized the signs of significant stress beneath the professional calm that both William and Catherine maintained. Mrs. Henderson, who had served as housekeeper for nearly a decade, noticed the way Catherine held herself slightly more rigidly than usual, and how William's normally easy smile seemed to require more effort. These observations were never shared beyond the trusted inner circle, but they reflected the genuine affection and concern that the staff felt for their employers. As 3 o'clock approached, William and Catherine made their way separately to the garden room, the small, intimate space they had chosen for their private farewell. The room was filled with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating the comfortable sofas and family photographs that made this space feel more like a home than a palace. Fresh flowers from the palace gardens filled a crystal vase on the side table, their sweet fragrance providing a gentle contrast to the emotional weight of the moment. Catherine arrived first, taking a moment to compose herself before William joined her. She had changed into a simple blue dress, one of William's favorites, and had taken extra care with her appearance not out of vanity, but as a way of showing love through attention to details that mattered to him. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt and checked her reflection one final time in the antique mirror near the door. William entered the room carrying a small gift bag, his expression tender but determined. He had spent considerable time the previous evening selecting something special for Catherine to have during his absence, finally settling on a delicate bracelet featuring small charms that represented significant moments in their relationship together. Each charm told a story: their engagement at the family cabin in Kenya, their wedding day, the births of their 3 children, moments of joy that would remind Catherine of their strong foundation even during the difficult weeks ahead. They sat together on the small sofa where they had shared countless quiet conversations over the years, the familiar comfort of the furniture providing a sense of normalcy even as they faced this extraordinary goodbye. Catherine's composure, which had remained steady throughout the morning, finally began to show signs of strain. Her eyes filled with tears that she tried unsuccessfully to blink away, and her voice carried a slight tremor when she finally spoke. The conversation that followed was both ordinary and extraordinary, touching on practical matters like how often they hoped to communicate and when William might be able to return, but also delving into deeper emotional territory about their fears, their love, and their commitment to each other and their family. William spoke about his sense of duty and responsibility, explaining how this mission represented an opportunity to make a meaningful difference in a volatile situation, while Catherine shared her pride in his dedication alongside her very natural concerns about his safety. They talked about the children and how to help them understand William's absence without causing unnecessary worry. George, as the eldest, would be told that his father was traveling for important work related to his future role as king, while Charlotte and Louis would simply be informed that Papa had a special job to do and would be home as soon as possible. Catherine would maintain their normal routines and activities, ensuring that the children felt secure and loved even with William away. The emotional intensity of their conversation was punctuated by moments of tenderness that reminded them both why their relationship had survived the unique pressures of royal life. William reached for Catherine's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become second nature over their years together. She leaned against his shoulder, finding comfort in his familiar strength and warmth, while he pressed gentle kisses to the top of her head. They shared memories of other separations they had survived, though none had carried quite the same weight of uncertainty as this one. There had been William's military service, various royal tours, and times when duty had required them to be apart, but always with clear timelines and well-defined parameters. This mission was different, with variables that couldn't be completely controlled and outcomes that remained uncertain despite careful planning. Catherine presented William with her letter, explaining that she wanted him to have words of love and encouragement to read whenever he needed reminding of what waited for him at home. William, in turn, gave her the bracelet he had selected, fastening it gently around her wrist while explaining the significance of each charm. The gift was both beautiful and deeply personal, a tangible reminder of their shared history and the memories that would sustain them during their separation. As 4 o'clock approached, they both understood that their private time together was drawing to a close. The departure schedule was inflexible, driven by security requirements and international coordination that couldn't accommodate personal preferences for longer goodbyes. Yet neither wanted to be the first to acknowledge that their farewell was ending, clinging to these final moments of privacy and intimacy before the demands of duty and protocol took precedence. The afternoon lights streaming through the garden room windows began to shift, casting longer shadows that seemed to emphasize the approaching transition from togetherness to separation. Outside, the palace gardens continued their eternal cycle of growth and change, indifferent to the human emotions being played out within the ancient walls that had sheltered royal families for generations. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside signaled that the time for departure was imminent. Inspector Davies had arrived precisely on schedule, his presence a gentle but firm reminder that the mission's timeline could not be delayed. The security protocols required William's departure from the palace within the next 30 minutes, allowing for travel to a secure location where he would board a military aircraft for the first leg of his journey to the troubled region. Catherine and William rose from the sofa simultaneously, their movements reflecting the reluctance they both felt to end this precious private time together. The afternoon had passed far too quickly, yet they had managed to say the important things that needed to be expressed before his departure. The emotional weight of their conversation had brought them even closer together, reinforcing the deep bond that had sustained their marriage through previous challenges and would need to carry them through this separation. William pulled Catherine into his arms for what they both knew would be their final embrace in the quiet sanctuary of the garden room. The hug lasted longer than usual, each of them trying to memorize the feeling of being held by the other, the familiar scent and warmth that provided such comfort and security. Catherine's carefully maintained composure finally gave way completely, and tears flowed freely down her cheeks as she buried her face against William's shoulder. The prince's own emotional control wavered as he felt his wife's tears against his shirt and realized the full impact of what this goodbye meant to both of them. His voice was thick with emotion as he whispered words of love and reassurance, promising to stay safe and to return home as quickly as the mission would allow. He stroked her hair gently, a gesture that had comforted her countless times during their years together, while struggling with his own tears that threatened to overwhelm his composure. They separated slowly, reluctantly, both understanding that prolonging the farewell would only make the departure more difficult. Catherine used her handkerchief to wipe away her tears, while William straightened his tie and jacket, transforming himself back into the composed royal figure required for the official aspects of his departure. Yet their eyes remained locked together, communicating love and support without the need for additional words. The walk from the garden room to the palace's private entrance seemed both endless and far too short. They moved hand in hand through corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal farewells, past portraits of ancestors who had faced their own moments of duty and sacrifice. The weight of history seemed to surround them, providing perspective on their current situation while also emphasizing the continuity of royal service that William was carrying forward into another generation. Palace staff members positioned throughout their route maintained respectful distance while offering subtle nods of support and encouragement. These dedicated individuals had served the royal family faithfully for years, and many had developed genuine affection for William and Catherine that extended far beyond professional duty. Their presence provided a sense of continuity and support that would help Catherine maintain stability during William's absence. At the private entrance, William's protection team waited with professional efficiency, their vehicles arranged in the carefully choreographed formation that would ensure secure transportation to the departure point. Inspector Davies approached with quiet respect, carrying the secure communication device that would allow William to maintain contact with both his family and his official duties during the mission. The technology represented a lifeline that would help bridge the physical distance of separation. Catherine had prepared herself for this moment throughout the day, but the reality of watching William walk away proved more emotionally challenging than she had anticipated. Her royal training had taught her to maintain composure in public situations, but this farewell tested those skills in ways that protocol had never addressed. The love and concern she felt for her husband's safety created an internal struggle between her personal emotions and her public responsibilities. William's own struggle with the departure was evident in the way he hesitated before stepping toward the waiting vehicles. His duty to the mission and to the Commonwealth nation that needed his diplomatic intervention competed with his desire to remain with his family in the safety and comfort of home. The weight of future kingship meant that such conflicts between personal preference and public service would only become more frequent and more challenging as the years progressed. Their final kiss was tender and filled with all the words they hadn't been able to speak aloud. Catherine's hands rested on William's chest, feeling the steady heartbeat that had comforted her through countless peaceful nights together. William cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away the fresh tears that had begun to flow despite her efforts at control. The intimacy of the moment created a private bubble around them even in the presence of the waiting security team. As William turned to walk toward his vehicle, Catherine felt an almost physical pain at the separation, as if an essential part of herself was being torn away. She had never experienced such intense emotion during previous goodbyes, perhaps because none had carried quite the same combination of uncertainty and potential danger. The rational part of her mind understood that William was highly trained for diplomatic missions and would be protected by the best security professionals available, but the wife and mother in her could only focus on the risks and unknowns. William paused at the car door, turning back for one final look at Catherine. She stood in the palace doorway, beautiful and composed despite her tears, representing everything he loved about home and family and the life they had built together. The image burned itself into his memory, providing a mental photograph he could call upon during difficult moments in the challenging weeks ahead. He raised his hand in a small wave, a gesture both formal and deeply personal. The car doors closed with a soft finality that seemed to echo through the palace courtyard. Catherine watched as the vehicles began to move, their smooth departure contrasting with the emotional turmoil she felt inside. She remained in the doorway long after the convoy had disappeared from view, unable to move from the spot where she had last seen her husband, clinging to the final moments of connection before the reality of separation truly began. Mrs. Webb appeared quietly beside Catherine, offering a gentle presence without intrusive words or gestures. The older woman had witnessed royal farewells before and understood the importance of providing support while respecting the privacy of grief. Her silent companionship offered comfort during those first difficult minutes after William's departure, when the palace suddenly seemed too quiet and too empty. The afternoon continued around Catherine with the normal rhythms of palace life, but everything felt different in William's absence. The staff went about their duties with extra sensitivity, understanding that the princess would need time to process the emotional impact of the farewell. The children would return from their afternoon activities within an hour, requiring Catherine to compose herself and maintain the cheerful, stable presence they needed during their father's absence. Catherine finally moved from the doorway, walking slowly back through the corridors that seemed to echo with memories of the afternoon's emotional intensity. Each room she passed reminded her of moments shared with William, conversations over breakfast in the dining room, quiet evenings in the library, family games in the playroom. The palace that had always felt like home now seemed vast and lonely, filled with reminders of the person who was no longer there. In her private sitting room, Catherine settled into the chair by the window where she often spent quiet moments reflecting and planning. The bracelet William had given her caught the afternoon light, its small charms serving as tangible reminders of their shared happiness and the strong foundation that would sustain her during his absence. She touched each charm gently, recalling the memories they represented and finding strength in the love story they told. The sound of children's laughter echoing through the palace corridors announced the return of George, Charlotte, and Louis from their afternoon activities. Catherine quickly composed herself, wiping away the last traces of tears and checking her appearance in the small mirror beside her chair. The children's happiness and energy would require her full attention and emotional presence, regardless of her own feelings about William's departure. Maria, the children's nanny, had clearly prepared them for their father's absence with age-appropriate explanations that emphasized his important work rather than any potential dangers. George entered the sitting room first, his school bag slung over his shoulder and his face bright with enthusiasm about a science project he wanted to share with his parents. The disappointment in his expression when he realized only his mother was present was quickly masked by his natural politeness and consideration. Charlotte bounced into the room with her usual exuberance, immediately noticing that something was different about the atmosphere in the palace. At 8 years old, she possessed an intuitive understanding of adult emotions that often surprised her parents with its accuracy. She studied her mother's face carefully, recognizing signs of sadness despite Catherine's efforts to maintain a cheerful demeanor for the children's benefit. Little Louis, still carrying the boundless energy of a 5-year-old, was more interested in showing off a new playground game he had learned than in analyzing the adult dynamics around him. His innocent chatter about his day provided a welcome distraction from the emotional weight Catherine had been carrying since William's departure. His carefree attitude served as a reminder of the stability and normalcy she needed to maintain for all 3 children. Catherine gathered her children close to her on the large sofa, creating the warm family circle that had become a comforting evening ritual in the royal household. She explained that their father had traveled for important work related to helping people in another country, emphasizing his role as a future king and the responsibilities that sometimes required him to be away from home. The explanation was truthful while avoiding details that might cause unnecessary worry. George, with his growing understanding of his family's unique position, asked thoughtful questions about his father's work and when he might return. Catherine answered honestly about the uncertain timeline, while reassuring him that Papa would come home safely and as soon as his important work was finished. The 10-year-old's mature response to the situation demonstrated the careful balance of royal upbringing that prepared him for future responsibilities while preserving his childhood innocence. Charlotte's reaction was more emotional, and she snuggled closer to her mother while processing the information about her father's absence. Catherine stroked her daughter's hair gently, offering the physical comfort that helped calm the little girl's worries. The princess understood that Charlotte's sensitivity often meant she picked up on emotional undercurrents that her brothers might miss, requiring extra reassurance and attention. Louis, true to his spirited nature, declared that he would draw pictures for Papa to see when he came home, immediately launching into detailed plans for the artwork he would create. His innocence and optimism provided a lightness that helped lift the mood in the room, reminding Catherine of the resilience and adaptability that children naturally possessed when faced with changes to their routine. The family spent the early evening together in their private quarters, maintaining the bedtime routines that provided security and continuity for the children. Catherine read stories with extra attention and care, understanding that these familiar rituals would help her children feel safe and loved during their father's absence. She answered their questions patiently and honestly, providing the emotional anchor they needed while William was away. As the children settled into bed, Catherine found herself lingering longer than usual in each of their rooms. She listened carefully to George's prayers, which now included a special request for his father's safety and quick return. She helped Charlotte organize her stuffed animals in the precise arrangement that helped her feel secure at bedtime. She sang an extra lullaby to Louis, who had requested his favorite song about brave knights and distant adventures. After the children were asleep, Catherine returned to her private sitting room, where the quiet evening hours stretched before her with an unfamiliar emptiness. The palace staff had discreetly prepared a light dinner for her, understanding that she might prefer to eat quietly in her private quarters rather than in the formal dining room that would emphasize William's absence. The thoughtful gesture reflected the genuine care and consideration that the household staff felt for the royal family. The first encrypted message from William arrived at 8:30, transmitted through the secure communication system that would maintain their connection throughout his mission. His words were brief but loving, confirming his safe arrival at the first staging point and expressing his love for Catherine and the children. The message provided enormous relief and marked the beginning of what would become their lifeline of communication during the separation. Catherine composed her reply carefully, sharing news about the children's reactions to his departure and her own adjustment to his absence. She described Louis's plans for artwork and Charlotte's extra snuggles, knowing that these family details would provide William with comfort and connection to home during his diplomatic duties. The electronic communication felt both intimate and distant, a poor substitute for his physical presence, but precious nonetheless. The evening hours passed slowly as Catherine adjusted to the altered rhythms of palace life without William. She reviewed her schedule for the coming days, noting the public engagements and meetings that would help fill her time constructively while maintaining her royal responsibilities. The structure of official duties would provide stability and purpose during the uncertain weeks ahead, allowing her to channel her energy into meaningful work. Her private secretary had prepared a comprehensive briefing on the charitable organizations and causes that Catherine would be visiting during William's absence. The schedule included a children's hospital visit, several meetings with her early childhood development team, and a ceremonial tree planting that would honor environmental conservation efforts. These engagements represented the continuation of her important work, regardless of personal circumstances. The palace's night staff moved through their duties with extra quiet consideration, understanding that the princess might appreciate additional privacy and peace during this difficult transition. The familiar sounds of the ancient buildings settling into evening calm provided a sense of continuity and security that helped counter the unusual circumstances of the day. As bedtime approached, Catherine faced the prospect of sleeping alone in the large bed she normally shared with William. The physical absence of her husband seemed most acute in their private bedroom, where the intimate routines of married life normally provided comfort and connection. She placed his pillow close to hers, finding some solace in the familiar scent that lingered on the fabric. Before settling for sleep, Catherine spent time writing in her personal journal, recording the events and emotions of this extraordinary day. The act of writing helped her process the complex feelings surrounding William's departure while creating a record that might someday help her remember the strength she had found during this challenging time. The journal had become a trusted confidant during previous difficult periods, providing a safe space for honest emotional expression. The last activity of her evening was reading William's letter once more, the words of love and encouragement providing comfort as she prepared for what would be many nights of separation. His handwriting was familiar and dear, representing a tangible connection to the man she missed already. The letter would remain close to her bedside throughout his absence, available for comfort whenever she needed reminding of his love and their strong partnership. As midnight approached and the palace settled into the deep quiet of night, Catherine reflected on the emotional journey of the day. The morning's anticipation, the afternoon's tearful farewell, and the evening's adjustment to William's absence had tested her in ways she had never experienced before. Yet she also recognized her own strength and resilience, qualities that would serve her well during the challenging weeks that lay ahead. 3 weeks had passed since that emotional farewell in the garden room, and Kensington Palace had settled into new rhythms that reflected William's absence while maintaining the stability that Catherine and the children needed. The secure communication system had enabled regular contact between William and his family, providing updates on his diplomatic progress and reassurance about his safety. Each message had been treasured, printed, and carefully preserved by Catherine as tangible reminders of their continuing connection despite the physical separation. The mission had proven more complex than initially anticipated, requiring William to extend his stay and navigate increasingly delicate negotiations between conflicting parties in the troubled region. His diplomatic skills and royal status had opened doors that remained closed to traditional diplomatic channels, making his presence invaluable to the peace process that was slowly taking shape. The Foreign Office had expressed genuine appreciation for his contributions, noting that his intervention had prevented what could have become a much more serious international crisis. Catherine had found her own strength during these weeks, managing her royal duties with grace while providing the stable, loving presence that her children needed. Her public engagements had been particularly meaningful, as if channeling her personal experience of separation and worry into deeper empathy for the families and individuals she met during her charitable work. The children's hospital visit had been especially poignant, as she connected with parents facing uncertainty about their own children's well-being. George had adapted to his father's absence with the mature understanding that characterized his approach to royal life, though he asked daily about when Papa might return home. Charlotte had initially struggled with the separation, but had found comfort in the nightly video calls that the secure communication system made possible. Louis, with the resilience of youth, had adjusted quickly to the new routine while creating an impressive collection of artwork intended for his father's eventual return. The palace staff had rallied around Catherine and the children with remarkable dedication, providing extra support and consideration without overstepping the boundaries of professional service. Mrs. Webb had proven especially valuable, offering practical assistance and emotional support with the wisdom that came from years of experience with royal family dynamics. The household had functioned smoothly despite William's absence, testament to the professionalism and loyalty of the dedicated team. On the morning of April 8th, Catherine received the news she had been hoping for since William's departure. The diplomatic mission had achieved its primary objectives, and arrangements were being made for his return to London within 48 hours. The relief that flooded through her was so intense that she had to sit down, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept carefully controlled during the weeks of separation. The children's joy upon hearing the news was boundless and infectious. George immediately began planning a welcome home celebration, while Charlotte insisted on baking William's favorite biscuits with the palace kitchen staff. Louis announced his intention to show Papa every single drawing and craft project he had created during the absence, spreading his artwork across the playroom floor in preparation for the grand presentation. Catherine spent the day before William's return in careful preparation, coordinating with the household staff to ensure that his homecoming would be perfect. Fresh flowers were arranged throughout their private quarters, his study was organized exactly as he preferred it, and his favorite meal was planned for their first dinner together as a complete family again. Every detail mattered, representing the love and care that had sustained them through the separation. The anticipation was almost unbearable as the hours counted down to William's expected arrival. Catherine found herself checking the time constantly, unable to concentrate fully on any activity while her thoughts remained focused on the reunion that was finally approaching. The children's excitement was equally intense, making normal routines and activities nearly impossible as they waited for their father to come home. When the secure communication finally arrived confirming William's departure from the mission location, Catherine felt a combination of relief, excitement, and nervous anticipation that reminded her of their early courtship days. The reality of seeing him again after 3 weeks of separation suddenly seemed overwhelming, despite the regular communication that had maintained their connection. The physical presence that she had missed so desperately would soon be restored. The afternoon of William's return was filled with careful preparations and mounting excitement throughout the palace. The children had been allowed to stay up past their usual bedtime, understanding that this was a special occasion worthy of exception to normal rules. They gathered in the same garden room where their parents had said goodbye, transformed now into a celebration space rather than a place of farewell. Catherine positioned herself at the private entrance where she had watched William leave 3 weeks earlier, her heart racing with anticipation as she waited for the sound of approaching vehicles. She had chosen to wear the same blue dress she had worn for their goodbye, wanting to create a visual connection between the departure and the homecoming. The bracelet he had given her remained on her wrist, its charms catching the evening light. The sound of car doors closing in the courtyard announced William's arrival, and Catherine felt her composure dissolve into pure joy and relief. The weeks of worry, loneliness, and responsibility seemed to fall away as she prepared to welcome home the man who completed her world. Her hands trembled with excitement as she smoothed her dress and checked her appearance one final time. William appeared in the doorway looking tired from his journey but healthy and whole, his face transforming with joy as he saw Catherine waiting for him. The mission had clearly taken its toll, evident in the new lines of fatigue around his eyes and the weight he seemed to carry from the serious responsibilities he had shouldered. But his smile was radiant as he dropped his travel bag and opened his arms to embrace his wife. Their reunion kiss was passionate and desperate, filled with 3 weeks of missed connections and suppressed emotions. Catherine clung to him as if she never intended to let him go again, feeling the solid reality of his presence after so many nights of empty arms and worried dreams. William held her equally tightly, burying his face in her hair and breathing in the familiar scent that meant home and love and everything he had missed. The children's arrival interrupted their private moment, but filled the space with even more joy as they rushed to embrace their father with squeals of delight and excited chatter. William knelt to their level, gathering all 3 children into his arms simultaneously, while Catherine watched with tears of happiness streaming down her face. The family circle was complete once again, the palace walls seeming to exhale with relief at the restoration of their unity. As the evening progressed, the family settled into their private quarters for the intimate reunion that had been so long anticipated. Louis proudly displayed his artwork collection, Charlotte served the biscuits she had helped bake, and George shared stories of his school adventures and growing responsibilities as the eldest child. William listened with complete attention, making up for lost time and reconnecting with the daily details of his children's lives. Later, after the children had been reluctantly persuaded to go to bed despite their desire to stay with Papa longer, Catherine and William found themselves alone in their bedroom for the first time in 3 weeks. The emotional intensity of their separation and reunion created an intimacy that felt both familiar and renewed, as if they were rediscovering each other after a much longer absence than the actual time that had passed. They talked late into the night about William's mission, Catherine's experiences managing alone with the children, and the ways that the separation had affected each of them. Both acknowledged that the experience had tested their relationship in unexpected ways, while ultimately strengthening their appreciation for what they shared together. The challenges of royal duty would continue to require sacrifices, but their love and partnership had proven capable of surviving even the most difficult circumstances. As they finally settled for sleep, wrapped in each other's arms in their own bed, both Catherine and William reflected on the journey that had taken them from that tearful goodbye to this joyous reunion. The palace around them seemed to settle into contentment, its ancient walls having witnessed another chapter in the ongoing story of royal duty, personal sacrifice, and enduring love that defined their extraordinary lives together.